I told you this guy was an escape artist. It's been literally about a minute since I recorded the last video. Okay, so set that guy down right there. Oh, another one starting to make... Look at this. Look at this. See what I have to deal with? Ugh. Alright, so let's talk about body structure. Starting with the gastropods. Now, here's the deal. I've got all of them here, and these are things that are common between all of the mollusks, except for gills. All of them are going to have a mantle. That is the thing which secretes this shell. And as I said, these little guys down here, they do have a shell. Slugs have a shell inside of their body. Believe it or not, squids also have a shell inside of their body. So do octopi and nautiluses. They all have a mantle which secretes a shell. And then we have this thing called a foot. Now, this is much different than the foot that you're probably thinking of. What we mean by foot... Get in there. What we mean by foot is this muscly mass down here that pushes the snail or the slug along. In bivalves, I guess this is sort of turning into a discussion about everybody's anatomy, not just the gastropods. But in bivalves, it's more of a big muscle that opens and closes the shell. And then for squids, you've got a bunch of feet, really tentacles. For all cephalopods, you're going to have that. One funny thing about gastropods, have you thought about the name yet? Gastropods? Remember how we said that pods meant feet? Gastro means stomach. So it's basically a word that means stomach foot. They have a big foot on their stomach. That's how they got their name, was that we had this big sort of foot muscle thing on the bottom of them, and that's why they're named that, if it helps you remember. Another thing that these two guys have in common is gills. Now, there are some aquatic species of snails and slugs, but for the most part, snails have this thing called a pneumostome, and a pneumostome actually leads to some primitive lungs inside of a snail or slug's body. Gastropods tend to have one of these instead of gills, but these guys will have actual gills that they use to get oxygen from water. Then we have this thing called a visceral mass. Now notice, with every other animal phylum we have talked about so far, I have talked about a main advancement, a thing that makes them more complex than all the previous animals. This is that for our mollusks. The thing that makes a mollusk more advanced is a visceral mass. What is that? Well, visceral means basically having to do with organs. So we've got a mass of organs. A visceral mass is you can think of it as a pouch that this animal has that helps keep all of its organs contained and separated from the rest of its body. So a visceral mass is a group of tissues which protects the organs. This is very important because it has to do with how these organisms develop. They have a type of tissue when they develop... Sorry, I'm getting one of the snails. Or the slugs, rather. They have a type of tissue called a coelom that eventually turns into the visceral mass that other animals don't have. Worms actually have something called a pseudocoelom, which acts similarly to this mass, but isn't a true one. Only the mollusks have a visceral mass so far. We have one. We have something that protects all of our organs. So finally, we need to talk about the circulatory system. This is a little bit complicated when it comes to the mollusks because they don't all have the same circulatory system. Let's take a look at the two different types.